Markets now, and we're focusing on one particular stock that is still massive on the JSE, the tech company Naspers. Traditionally, the biggest stock, it spun off its subsidiary MultiChoice. It has been flying high for years, mostly because it has a significant stake in a technology company in China called Tencent. But now Tencent is being threatened, and Naspers is seeing incredible falls this week. So let's take a look at the latest. And at around 4:30 this afternoon, Naspers was down by 6.6%. I can tell you it did pay some of those losses, closing at just under 4% in the red on the day. Yesterday, however, Naspers fell by nearly 14%. This is all on talk that Tencent is facing a record fine in China. Naspers holds a 29% stake in Tencent, and some investors over the years have said that the company's best investment is also one of its biggest threats because China can be draconian when it clamps down or asserts regulatory issues in terms of its technology companies. We'll follow that story of Naspers for you. Now, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has led to sanctions against Russia from various countries, and the impact has been significant on wealthy Russians with bank accounts and investments all over the world. What's happening has been called unbanking. In one example, people who have Visa, MasterCard or American Express cards will no longer be able to buy goods or use ATMs in Russia. To discuss, we're now joined by banking analyst Chris Gilmore. Chris, thank you for joining us as always. Given what's happened to the ruble in Russia, it's presumably the Russians with dollars who could be looking pretty, but they are the ones affected by this move to unbank them or the sanctions.
Oh, absolutely. And as we've also seen with Ludmila Reuterblatt, it's not just people in Russia. They're extending it quite considerably, although I'm not entirely sure where FNB is coming from. I suspect with Reuterblatt, what they're doing with her is identifying her as what's called a politically exposed person. Now, the South African banks, when they identify someone as a PEP, a politically exposed person, they have every right to cut them out of the equation. But this is a different case to what's going on, to what you've just been talking about.
Well, Chris, let me stop you there, because the FNB case has made the news, and FNB, by the way, is saying they are cutting ties with her. That decision had been made before the Russian invasion of Ukraine, but the timing does look suspicious.
Yes, it does indeed. And look, a lot of this goes back quite some years now. You've had a lot of sanctions being progressively placed upon Russians, upon wealthy Russians, and it's just now gathered a lot more pace since the invasion of Ukraine, and it's going to get even more. It's going to gather even more pace as time goes on if Russia insists on carrying on with this ill-conceived invasion. So I've never seen such a comprehensive set of sanctions applied against any particular country. I don't know how long this will go on for. I said it'll really go on for as long as Russia remains in Ukraine. But beyond that, once sanctions are in place, it takes a long time and a lot of political will to start removing them. And the only people who really get hurt by this are the ordinary Russians in the streets. We saw it with many countries around the world. You see it in Iran. You see the ordinary Iranians, they're really struggling because of what's been happening to the top people there.
Yeah. Well, what is the impact? Because you've raised certain things that this could only last as long as the invasion lasts. But presumably MasterCard, for instance, will cut off the service, but the money of those wealthy Russians will remain in bank accounts on hold, as it were. They could still use that later when this conflict ends. Nobody's taking their money away. I mean, I don't know. Explain it to me. Certainly that would be the hope for the Russians, and also the banks who presumably want their business that reportedly goes into the billions here.
Yes, you're quite right. The banks have been put in an invidious position because, as you rightly say, the banks can suspend operations, but they can't actually physically keep that money forever. They would have to prove that there's a good reason for holding on to it. And at some point in time, after this is over, they'll have to return it to them. And look, I'm sure that many of these organizations are just champing at the bit and wanting to go back into Russia because, you know, it's a big country. It's a country that loves, the people love spending money. And, they want to do business with it again. So it's really, I think, a bit of a Mexican standoff in many ways. Unless and until Russia gets out of Ukraine, this is going to carry on, and the banks will pretty much do what the governments in the West actually tell them what to do.
Yeah, Deutsche Bank didn't want to close anything. It now says it's winding down its operations. Goldman Sachs, I think they're all using the same terminology. We're winding down our operations, but surely that gives the time to the account holders to make an alternative plan, to put their money in a safe place. Essentially, the bank is providing them a service of transition or something like that.
Yes, that's quite right. If you look at what Vladimir Putin did with his yacht just before the invasion started, it was getting a refit in Hamburg, and he made sure that the yacht was back in Russian waters before he started this whole caper. So yes, I think you're quite right. They're giving them time. Everyone knows full well that it's happening. And they're giving them time to make other arrangements. But having said that, it's very difficult to make other arrangements. I mean, when you're part of the international banking transfer system called SWIFT, yes, I know that Russia does have an alternative system, but it's much, much smaller. It's tricky to replicate what you have with SWIFT. Once you're out of SWIFT, it does mean that making international payments for goods and services gets very, very difficult. It means that those goods and services don't reach the end user, typically in the West, and it just causes misery for a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, then my final question, you said Putin's yacht was okay, but what about the rest of Russia's wealthy set? What do you think this means for Putin's popularity among the rich?
Yeah, it must be dwindling rapidly, and that's what sanctions are meant to do in any country. They are meant to actually bring down the government of the day through providing hardship for ordinary Russians and particularly for wealthy Russians. Let's not forget that Putin largely made these oligarchs, as they're called, these wealthy Russians. And if a lot of their wealth and a lot of their ability to actually create wealth and use that wealth and enjoy that wealth is taken away, they're going to blame Putin because of this ill-conceived incursion into Ukraine. And I think their wrath will be directed towards him. Is it going to be enough to have him removed? Only time will tell.
All right, thank you for that. Banking analyst Chris Gilmore on the unbanking of business people from Russia, and that's affecting their accounts around the world.